Council will come to order. It is Tuesday, March 11th at 4:30. The notice time for today's city council workshop. We'll begin today's meeting with roll call attendance. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. President. Councilman Cavanagh.
Here.
Councilwoman Little Roberts.
Here.
Councilman Overton.
Here.
Councilman Whitlock.
Here.
Councilwoman Strader.
Here.
Next up is the adoption of the agenda for motion.
Mr. Council President,
Yeah, Council Vice President Strader.
I move that we adopt the agenda as published.
Second.
Motion seconded. Any discussion? Roll call. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The chair heard all ayes and the agenda is adopted. Next up is our consent agenda.
Mr. Council President,
Council Vice President Strader.
move that we approve the consent agenda for the council president to sign and clerk to attest.
Second.
Motion seconded. In discussion? Mr. Clerk, please call roll. Oh. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. President Cavanagh.
Aye.
Little Roberts. Overton.
Aye.
Strader.
Aye.
Whitlock.
There were no all ayes, motion passes. Thank you. Next up on our agenda, there were no items moved from the consent, so we'll move to Department and Commission reports. First up is item 12, a fiscal 2025 budget amendment in the amount of $5,000. We have our chief here to present. Good afternoon, Chief Bloom.
Good evening, Council President Cavanagh and members of council. Yes, as you'll see, and as the packet indicates, the information that was provided to you, we are seeking the transfer of Light My Fire funds to be utilized by the Community Risk Reduction Division. That request was approved by Light My Fire as being consistent with a acceptable practice for the utilization of those funds. And specifically, the Craig 1300 is a software suite. It stands for Community Risk Assessment Insight Generator, and 1300 harkens back to the NFPA standard 1300, which is related to how organizations reduce communities' risk. And this insight generator allows us to see in real time the efficacy of our risk reduction initiatives. Are they working? Are they not working? Do we have a underserved area? Do we have one that is receiving more service than another area? So we can kind of see in a mapped out fashion what we're doing and how efficient it is. Are we doing the right thing for the right people at the right time? And are we doing enough of it or not enough of it? So that's really the software platform. This is not intended to be an ongoing cost. The intent is that we're going to utilize the data hub that Craig 1300 offers, and we've been working with the IT department, and they've agreed to help us try and generate and create a data hub dashboard that will be fine-tuned for the city of Meridian. So that's the intent.
Thank you, Chief. Any questions? Chief, I do have one question just because now I'm slightly confused. Your presentation indicated no ongoing additional costs, but in the budget amendment, it shows that it's $5,000 a year ongoing. So I guess it's either is or it's not ongoing. So help me understand why it's notated for ongoing in the budget amendment, but you're saying that it's
Yeah, fair question. As I understand it, and in talking with my team, we were looking at just purchasing it for 1 year and then utilizing that platform for up to 2 to 3 years while we're standing up our internal process. So we're not looking at creating an ongoing purchase requirement for this. This would just be a one-time for 1 year to get this hub.
Council, I'm just going to notate, I hope Mr. Miles is watching. I think that's probably a good conversation for us to at least to flag how we notate one-time software purchases as opposed to software purchases that are intended to have an ongoing revenue expectation. So we can figure that piece moving forward. If we're saying one time, we don't want necessarily have next year, then that's part of the ongoing software expenses that the city takes on. So when a motion's in order, maybe denoting that as part of the motion would be beneficial. So thanks, Chief.
Yes, sir.
No other questions?
Mr. President,
Councilmember Little Roberts.
Mr. President and Chief, I don't know if this will tie in with an update regarding the lithium batteries, but I'll ask that question and let you go from there.
Well, Councilwoman Little Roberts, that's a great question. Certainly nationally, we're seeing the lithium ion battery problem increase in frequency and severity when it comes to the thermal runaway of those battery cells. Currently, aside from utilizing our infers, and which will transition to Nearest, our federal government reporting software of our calls that we go on, this is a supplement to that. This would actually supplement that and allow us to identify, again, the frequency and occurrences of lithium ion batteries and identify if in fact that is the cause of, an increase in fires in residential homes or in apartments. So that's an excellent example. And that's just one example of what we'll be able to utilize with this data terminal, data platform.
Great, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Council President Cavanagh.
Yes. Council Vice President Strader.
Would it be okay if we hear from our CFO, Todd Lavoy, to clarify the nature of this budget amendment?
As he is up here, I was hoping he'd be able to provide some clarity. Good afternoon, Mr. Lavoy. Happy to hear your insight.
Good afternoon, thank you. So I did verify with Jenny Fields and with IT that the software that is being acquired is an ongoing expense per the IT department. So you are correct, you're buying it one time, but according to IT, this is an ongoing expense that there will be expenses every single year from this point forward. You're buying a software package. So that is the information we have. Again, we can get Dave to double check tomorrow, but everything we are aware of is it is an ongoing expense, sir.
Council President Cavanagh.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I think I'd like to make a motion that we approve this on a one-year basis and have the fire department report back on how it goes, because it's a new program and I think we should assess its efficacy at the end of 1 year and then take it from there. That's my 2 cents.
So, Council, Council Vice President Strader, I understand, I think what you're requesting with this is a one-time purchase for 1 year. The only piece that I'm somewhat a little reluctant on is that if they purchase it March 11th of 2025, it would be up for renewal March 11th of 2026 outside of our budget hearing process, which means it would either require them to come back before us again to renew with a budget amendment, or we would not continue the service until it is included as part of the fiscal year 2027 budget. So, Council and Chief, I'm reluctant now to support the budget amendment this evening until we have some greater clarity about the long-term needs. If we're hearing you say we need this for 1 year and 1 year only, great. Then I think we can move forward, but that's not reflected as what's written in the budget amendment. If we think and anticipate that this is an ongoing need that the department is going to need, I think that's also okay. That's just, we want to make sure that we are taking the totality of the request into consideration before a decision's made this evening.
Councilman Cavanagh, I appreciate that. And in talking with staff and in the memo that was provided to you, or as part of the packet of information, it says, we are asking for the program's cost for the $49.50, but in talking with staff and working with IT, the intent is to get it for the 1 year, and in that time develop the platform or hub, working with IT to move away from this software for future and ongoing.
Okay. As long as council's aware of what it is they're going to be asked to be voting on this evening. Should that be what the motion is?
Council President Cavanagh.
Councilmember Strader.
Yeah, I just want to make sure, so from your perspective, so if we approve this evening, it's going to be approved for 1 year of funding. If for some reason your internal team build out to meet this need does not occur, you would have to come back to us. And to Council President Cavanagh's point, you would need another budget amendment. So I just want to make sure you understand.
Councilwoman Strader, that is correct. And that would be an exact characterization of how I understand it as well.
Okay. Council President Cavanagh.
Please, Councilmember Schrader.
I would move that we approve the fiscal year 2025 budget amendment in the amount of $5,000 to authorize the CPR software purchase utilizing Light My Fire donation funds, explaining that the council is approving this ongoing cost for 1 year only.
Second?
Been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All right, we'll ask the clerk to call roll.
Thank you, Mr. President. Cavanagh.
No.
Little Roberts.
Aye.
Overton.
Aye.
Strader.
Aye.
Whitlock.
4 ayes, 1 nay, and the budget amendment is approved.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Mr. LaVoy. Next up is item 13, fiscal year 2024 financial audit from our friends from Eide Bailey. We'll turn this over to a man who needs no introduction, our CFO, Todd LaVoy, back again. Nice to see you. I feel like it was just mere minutes ago that
Been
we
a
were,
long time. Good.
sir.
Long time no see. Again, members of the council appreciate the opportunity to allow our financial independent auditors to present to you and also allow you guys to ask them any questions, how the last fiscal year 24 audit went. Tonight, you do have Kevin Smith. He's our partner. You have Kaylee Holt, who is our audit manager. So again, I will bring up Kevin. He will present to you a few slides, but please engage them with questions about the fiscal 24 audit. And with that, I will bring up Kevin Smith. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. LaVoy. Mr. Smith, it's nice to have you back here. It's been a couple of years. I'm
Thank you.
looking forward to hearing from you. Sir, the time is yours.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity. And Kaylee Holt's with me, and she can go over, a lot of the detail if you have questions. Okay, I don't know how to advance the slide, but
Use the arrow, your right arrow on the mouse. On
there
the
you go.
board.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. We'll just go a little bit over the audit process itself. And if you have questions on that, please let us know, and we're happy to address those. First and foremost, the most important part of the audit is that we issue an opinion. And that opinion is what we call a clean or an unmodified opinion. There are other types of opinions that can be rendered. And so the goal for us as auditors and also for management and city council members is that, we issue a clean opinion, and we have rendered that. And we have in the past also. Also, within the financial statements, there are other reports and opinions that are rendered. And the one on internal controls over financial reporting and compliance. And so compliance with government auditing standards. And since you're a government entity, you have to follow additional standards which are prescribed by the government standard board. And in that, if there are any what we call material weaknesses or significant deficiencies or lack of controls, then we would obviously point those out to you in the report. And if it was a serious nature, we'd bring it to your attention before the audit was final. And we did not have any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies. And we do processes, procedures related to your internal controls to make sure that they are adhered to as they are written. And we didn't have any comments related to those. And then we do issue an opinion, and an unmodified opinion, again, another clean opinion on what we call the single audit or the federal funds that you receive. And anytime you receive over $750,000 in federal funds, you're required to have an audit of those programs. And there's different type of thresholds within that threshold that ones that we have to audit, and they rotate, from year to year. And the larger dollar amounts of federal funds would have to be audited, and we issued an unmodified or clean opinion, had no comments related to those federal funds. We issue a letter also along with the financial statement, our communication to you, and because you're the ones that are charged with governance, and so that governance letter goes to you. And every audit that we perform, before the audit starts, we as auditors look at this and assess the significant risk areas. And the risk areas in almost all audits that we do are related to the internal controls that we talked about. We also, in that letter, it talks about the difficulties, if we have any difficulties that we encounter during and performing the audit, any corrected or uncorrected misstatements or any adjustments that we would have. And then in the end of the audit, the management represents to us that they have provided all the information. And so we'll start with the significant risks. And the two risks that we identified at the beginning of the audit was, any opportunities to override the controls or override the processes and procedures, and then also improper revenue recognition. And those two risks are identified in every audit that we do. And part of that, as we just heard, an amendment to the budget, if there's opportunities to move revenue or to recognize in a different period because of the budget, and that would be kind of an override of that process and procedures. That's why the revenue recognition is important and a risk. Any difficulties encountered during the audit, and we bring this up, and if we had issues with staff or not getting information timely, we would want you to be aware of that. And we want to take the time right now to talk about Todd and Jenny and Carol and all those that are involved in the financial statement process. They pay attention to details and the process and procedures, and they take it very serious. And the fact that we didn't have any adjustments and no management comments is reflection on them because of the way they perform their duties on a daily basis. And the fact that we don't have any adjustments means that, during the year that you can be confident in the decisions you're making. If we come in and did the audit and we had 10 or 12 adjustments at the end of the year, that would probably mean that, 6 months ago that you probably had those same adjustments, but they weren't reflected and you're making decisions. So that's always significant. So we did not have any corrected adjustments. We did not have any uncorrected. We did have uncorrected adjustments, what we call past adjustments, and these are ones that have been carried forward from year to year. And Kaylee, do you want to talk about the past adjustments, the uncorrected misstatements that we had?
Yeah, so there are a handful of uncorrected misstatements, and so I just want to reiterate, with these uncorrected misstatements, they're not material to the financial statements. So that's what allows them to be passed on. So your financial statements are still materially correct. It's just a management decision to not post these entries into the financial statements. So the first past adjustment that we had was related to the recognition of the National Opioid Settlement Funds. And this was a new and emerging accounting issue and how the recognition and treatment of these funds was being accounted for. And it was incredibly complex in trying to figure out the recognition of the funds that were being received. In addition to that, checks were showing up and nobody really had any context for them. And due to the timing of when those checks were received or were starting to be received was actually back in fiscal year 22. And so once we got the recognition figured out for how the opioid monies were to be recognized for the city, that just led to what we call a past prior period adjustment. So last year, these funds would have been recognized in fiscal year 23. And so in the current year, those are being recognized in fiscal year 24 is what the premise of that past adjustment is. So again, reiterating that it's not a material adjustment or a past adjustment, but there is $172,000 of general fund revenue that's being recognized in fiscal year 24 that does relate to funds received back in fiscal year 23. Any questions on that one before I move on to the next ones? Okay, so the other two, the next one is also going to be related to the National Opioid Settlement. So when we report these past adjustments, we have them broken out by your different basic financial statements. So the first is going to be at that fund level, which are the financial statements that you're more used to seeing on a day-to-day basis. The second portion of these past adjustments is the governmental activities. So this is the one time a year financial statement that you see that's on the full accrual basis of accounting. It's got all those GAAP adjustments in there. And so this is the adjustment that relates to the prior year. And so the accounting treatment for the opioid settlements, the way that the city of Meridian was receiving those monies was that the city should have recognized $883,000 all in the year that the settlements were approved. And so the triggering event of when those monies were to be recognized was when that was approved, or when each of the settlements were approved, excuse me. And so that would have been last year, and actually in fiscal year 22 as well. So just some timing differences on the approval of those various different settlements. And so that's why we have that past adjustment there. And the second one that you see on there is an entry to pass on the recognition of SIBTA assets and liabilities for those arrangements that did not meet the city's established threshold. And the total of those amounts is $292,000. So last year, there was a brand new accounting standard for subscription-based information technology arrangements, otherwise known as IT subscriptions, is the simple way to think about that. And so the city internally in their finance department, which is very common in all of the governments that we work with, set a threshold for SIBTA agreements that they were not going to track and report on. And so they do kind of keep a separate list of those. And it just is due to the administrative burden caused by this standard. And so the standard has no established threshold. So that would mean that the city is spending time to track and record SIBTA agreements, whether they are $2,000 or $200,000. And so the city set a limit and said, hey, due to the administrative burden caused by this standard, we are going to set a limit of the ones that we're going to track and record, and then we'll have the ones that we just expense on an annual basis. And so when you aggregate all of the ones together that are expensed on an annual basis, that number is $292,000. So that is that second adjustment that we have on there. Any questions on any of those for us?
Quick question, just your comment about the opioid settlements and essentially acknowledging those in the year, or referencing the funds in the year that we accept the agreement, but that often is different. We don't typically receive the funds at the same time that we approve the agreement. So how should cities function? Because that one kind of perked my interest, because normally we would reflect once we receive the dollars, not when we approve the agreement. So help me understand why we should be, I guess, why, I'm not that bright.
I'm following your
Why
train
we
of
should,
thought.
thank you, okay.
Yeah,
Save
Council
me
President.
from myself.
No, you're good. Thank you, Council President. So just to give you some context about the opioids, so there's different phases is the way that I like to think about them. And so the first of the phases, I'll start over with saying, so the city of Meridian, in the context of the national opioid settlement, is what's known as a litigating party or an active participant in the opioid settlement funds. And so because the city of Meridian is a litigating party, there is a revenue recognition criteria that is triggered, and that is fully a requirement of GAAP. And so in order for those financial statements to be GAAP compliant, those are the rules we have to follow, because the city of Meridian is known as what's called a litigating party. And so under that, because the city of Meridian was participating as a litigating party, there is what's called, we've got non-exchange and exchange revenue. And so when you have an exchange right, there's a give and a take. Non-exchange, it's no give and take. And so because the city of Meridian was an active participant in that, and they said, hey, we want to participate in this class action lawsuit. If there are funds that are to be distributed at the end of it, we would like to be the beneficiary of those so that we can put that money back out into our community for opioid mitigation. And so because of that, the exchange revenue recognition criteria require it on a full accrual basis of accounting, so on those government-wide financial statements, to be recognized when you are legally, you can get that, the money is legally yours when that settlement is signed, is the way to think about it. And so the moment that there is ink on paper, you are legally entitled, based on the class action lawsuit, to receive those funds. And so that is the piece that triggers the revenue recognition at that government-wide level. And so back to your point too, the other piece of that is that fund level. So when we're looking at that first adjustment at the general fund, the revenue recognition for that piece of it is when you receive the actual money. So when I was working with the finance team on making sure we got this all figured out and everything recorded correctly, the closest thing I could liken it to, just to provide a little bit more context, is the recognition of property taxes. And so this is actually pretty similar to the way that property taxes are recognized, both at the fund level and at the government-wide level as well. So not to get too technical with you all, but with property taxes, there's deferred inflows of resources for money that you know that you're gonna get. It just hasn't come through the door quite yet. And so you know it's out there, but there's no cash in hand. And so that's very similar to the way that the opioid monies are operating is the settlement funds were approved. Each of the different defendants in the class action lawsuit know how much money they have to remit, but it's over an extended period of time. Some of them go out to, I believe, 2036. So there's a schedule of what different governments are entitled to receive over that extended period of time. And so a lot like property taxes, you know what you're gonna get and when you're gonna get it, but you just don't have the cash in hand quite yet. So that is the closest thing I could liken it to, was the recognition of those property taxes. So hopefully that answers kind of your questions and gives you a little context about those ones. But it is a tricky, it was tricky. I would say for the other government entities that we do around the Treasure Valley, they were going through the same, a lot of the same, I would say, figuring this out and making sure that everyone was getting it recorded correctly. Just because we hadn't seen anything really like this before.
Got it.
So,
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
yeah, of course.
Any other questions about this portion?
As I mentioned at the end of the audit, management, signs a representation letter, a letter that's kind of, it's format letter, but, basically telling us that they have represented, they have provided us all the information that we've asked for and that it's accurate and that it can be relied on by us. And with that, we'll open it up for any additional questions that you may have regarding the audit process or the financial statements themselves. We're happy to respond.
Any question for council?
Council President?
Councilman Bashir?
Just a comment, like getting a clean audit, it's not like we get fireworks and anything too exciting. Boring is good in your world, so we appreciate your efforts, but thanks for bringing those to our attention, especially that is kind of tricky around how the how the opioid settlement revenues were recognized and also the little details with the software. So we appreciate it. Thank you.
Kevin, just one maybe question. You've started working with the city when we were much smaller population, much smaller amount of revenue, smaller finance department staff. And as we've grown, you've kind of grown with us. Are there things that we as elected officials that have that fiduciary responsibility to our citizens should be thinking about as cities continue to grow that needs to be maybe on our radar so that we're proactively engaging in that as opposed to reacting at a later point in time?
You've already done that, and you've done it very well, as you can see in reflection in your financial statements. Now, your fund balance, your cash position is different than anyone else's, and it's because you've made those decisions years ago, and they've carried on to today, and so that you can make good decisions going forward. So, as far as the financial part, you have done that, and you've done it well. So, but I would recommend that you continue to do that and be conservative and just be prepared for what's to come. A couple things kind of outside the financial statements, a couple areas, as we go around to different, entities, cybersecurity is ongoing. What we see, the changes with AI and other things technology-wise, just we can never relax in that area and never think that we have enough and that we're set, because we continue to see with our clients that they think they are set, they think they have everything in place, and they don't.
That's a good point. I appreciate that.
And processes and procedures, another area, and we've done some, agreed upon procedures, some internal control procedures, that have been asked for by management, and we're always happy to pick specific areas. And it's just a good ongoing practice to always look at different areas, different departments that, that we can come in and just do a deeper look into.
I'll add to that as well, that I think from my experience in working with the city, I think I'm on my 4th year at this point. And I've worked with various different sizes of cities all within the state of Idaho. And I think my biggest thing that I've seen is cities making decisions to invest in technology that helps your people do their job on a day-to-day basis. I think it's, exciting and fun to invest in, these brand new or emerging technologies, which are also important to make sure that you're staying with current times. But where I see the biggest bang for the buck in the cities that I work with is making sure that you are focusing and paying attention to those technologies that just help your people get through their work on a day-to-day basis. And so I know that the city's made an investment in Workday, things like that, and making sure that the ERP systems are helping support and not working against your people. In terms of issues that I've seen with smaller governments, their systems are doing nothing for them. A lot of the processes are manual. It's taking a lot of time, effort, and energy from the people that work for those governments, and it makes their job really, really hard. And so when you have an integrated system like the city's invested in, that just makes it one less thing for the people to worry about so that they can focus on the more technical accounting things and making sure that they're getting their the recognition of different events and transactions correct throughout the year. So I would just say in what I've seen in the different sizes of cities that I've worked with is just to make sure that you're thinking and continuing to invest in those technologies that help your people do their job on a day-to-day basis.
Sound advice. Thank you both very much for being here. I know it's been a few years since we've had you before us, and as I was talking with the mayor, we hadn't had one of these updates in a long time, and I thought it was important for all of us to hear from our auditors about the process that they go through. And, council, some of you probably know this, but the team here recognized, Jenny and Carol, certainly Todd, and that whole department, while we continue to function and do our job, like the audit season for the finance department was a really big deal. And they continue to operate, and unless you know what's going on, you don't know that it's going on due to their level of professionalism and care. So, oh, Todd's back there. I think I see him. Todd, again, please pass along to your team how much we appreciate their efforts. And then thank you again for joining us this afternoon.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Okay, council, next on our agenda is item 14, 2025 Meridian Community Pool proposed fees. And we will turn it over to Garrett White. Good afternoon, Garrett. Welcome.
Council President Cavanagh, thanks for having me. Council, thanks for having me as well. Here tonight to kind of talk about pool fees. And really what I'm looking for tonight is no action really from you guys. It's more of just a head nod, thumbs up, those types of things based on my proposals. The timeline that I have here is, if you guys are not opposed to the fees I'm presenting today, then what I'll do is we'll post them and come back in 2 weeks for a public hearing for the fees. I would like to have the fees posted and done by April 1st. It's not a deal killer either way, but April 1st is kind of our target to have them all approved. We're gonna take swim lessons on the 3rd when that opens, and they go really fast. So I want to have all that stuff up and information out and posted as well. So with that, I'll go through my presentation. First, I want to just talk about the users of the pool. We do swim lessons for over 2,000 kids, and last year was the first time we were able to use our Care Enough to Share funds with that. We really tried to promote that. We had 27, 28 kids that actually used the Care Enough to Share funds, and we're hoping that grows again this year. And for those of you that don't know, I think everybody knows, but the Care Enough to Share funds are basically scholarships for the kiddos to go. It covers about 80% of the cost of swim lessons and any other program they do. Other users were our camps, our summer camps, outdoor adventure camp, Camp Meridian, Boys and Girls Clubs, daycare facilities. Some swim teams used it last year, the Killer Whales, Streamliners, Meridian High School, Rocky High School. They had some different swim meets as well. And really, we had a couple private parties and a couple other things, but mainly it was swim lessons, public swim, and swim teams that were used in the facility. Note that upstairs in the classroom area, we do have classes held year-round through our activity guide as well. Oh, I guess I can talk about the schedule. This is the schedule we had last year. It's kind of the tentative schedule we're looking for this year as well. It's over here to your right. Sundays is to be determined. It depends on how many guards we have, availabilities and stuff like that, but we'd love to see the pool open 7 days a week if at all possible with that. So I always put that on there. Talking fees now and cost recovery and really trying to keep up with inflation is really the message I want to send here. Currently with, in the pink there, you'll kind of see kind of what we do for our private swim lessons, semi-private, which is basically 2 kids, and then group lessons, and kind of what it all boils down to and what our profit and loss is on those. Those, we do make some money on our swim lessons, that help cover some of the costs of the facility, obviously, and the public swim. In the blue, just below that, you'll see that, we do lose money when it comes to public swim. And that's basically covering the guards on the deck and those types of things in the office and everywhere else. So we do lose quite a bit just on public swim itself. Our pool subsidy is down here at the bottom. In FY23 and FY24, those are actuals. You can kind of see our cost recovery, and these fees are really our ongoing cost, and I'm sorry, the subsidy, the operational costs there are the ongoing costs and not the big projects, the one-time projects that we use with wards money and things like that. But you can kind of see our cost recovery. Budgeted for FY25 is about 22% cost recovery, which we want to get better. Moving on to my fee proposals. Like I said before, these are really, I think the message I want to send is this really helps us keep up with the inflation portion of it and the operational cost. From my research that I've done with Ward and past employees at the pool, the fees have not been raised, to my understanding, and from 2017 or prior. That's kind of the guess is when the last time the fees were raised at the pool. So a few years back. So really what I'm trying to do is on the day passes, is the proposed fees is really just to raise it $1 per kid, per adult, whatever, maybe just in the day passes. And then the season passes for family and individuals reflect the increase, keeping the break-even point at about 15 visits per summer. The swim lessons I'm increasing because I do want to help cover the cost of the facility itself. They do cover the cost of the guards and some of the equipment that we use for that, but we also want to cover the facility as well on some of the swim lessons. Private parties increase it as well, just to cover the cost of all of our guards, plus some of the stuff that used in the facility. Same with the swim team meets and the swim team practices with that. So that's really kind of what it is. And these fees do put us in comparison with the market and surrounding cities. Not that we're really comparing, we apples and oranges there, but the fees to get in are very comparable to what others are offering. If we take on the proposed fees that I'm proposing and everybody's good with it, and we have the public hearing, everybody's good with it, this is kind of the reflection there. And like I said before, down there at the bottom, the pool subsidy and the proposed fee increases, it does keep our cost recovery at about 25%, right? So it doesn't necessarily give us a lot more, but it does keep our cost recovery about the same. So it kind of keeps us up with inflation on that aspect. So, and again, FY25 is budgeted ongoing costs, not the one-time stuff, but it keeps us up with that. With that, like I said, I'm kind of looking for some feedback, some yes, no, maybes, and go from there. So with that, I'll stand for questions.
Council, any questions for Mr. White?
Mr. President.
Councilmember Little Roberts.
Mr. President Garrett, thank you very much. I think our prices are more than reasonable. Was just curious about what the Cares for Shares, what all it will cover if a child has no access. Do they get lessons, open swim? What all will that cover for them?
Council President Cavanagh, Councilwoman Little Roberts. Great question. So what that does right now is that we don't have it eligible for the day passes. But if a kid came and wanted to do something with an individual pass or a family pass or a family campus, we'd make that work. Right now, the program's set up for the programs themselves of like swim lessons. But if somebody came to me and needed something like that, we would try to make something work for them in that aspect, if that makes any sense. But the program right now is primarily for programs themselves.
Great,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, good question. Thank you.
Council President.
Councilmember Overton.
Garrett, I know if you guys didn't have to raise rates, you wouldn't. I know that is a fact, and nobody likes to see rates go up.
Yeah.
But every aspect of operating that pool has gone up, from the wages you have to pay to the cost of chemicals to keep your pool running. I mean, there isn't a portion of anything that you do that hasn't gone up. And we would not be doing our job sitting up here if we weren't trying to keep you where you need to be for cost recovery, to be both efficient for the community, but also for the city. And I think that's a very fair budget you're lining out. I fully support it. I like what I see. It's not outrageous. I think it addresses the issues, the shortfalls, and brings you back up to where you want to be.
Council President.
Councilmember Schrader.
Yeah, I think considering it seems like it's been 7 or 8 years since there was an increase, which is a really long amount of time. My question is just, what is the cadence going forward to evaluate future increases? That's my question.
Council President Cavanagh, Councilwoman Strader, that's a great question. And we would love the opportunity to work with our council liaison or director and the people at the pool and just try to figure that out, and the mayor, obviously, and what is acceptable when it comes to the cost recovery, or where should we want to be? Does that make sense? Moving forward, we want to keep, we don't want to go backwards, right? So we want to continue to maintain our, is it 25%, is it 30%, or is it more cost recovery or subsidy? That's a great question.
Quick follow-up.
Oh, Councilmember Schrader.
Yeah, and I've noticed, and I can appreciate you guys are trying to round to the nearest dollar, including tax. And I actually think that makes some sense. Like, you know, maybe the fee structure is such that you look at it every year and you try to figure out if you're close enough that you need to like take that step. But yeah, I guess feedback for me is I'm supportive of the increase. You know, it's sad to ever have to increase our fees, but it's just the nature of the economy that we're living in. So we will continue to need to do this in order to provide a decent level of service to the community. So I appreciate you bringing it forward, and I'm very supportive of it. I'd love to see everybody maybe just evaluate this annually. And it could be that it's not material enough to make a change, and that's okay. But I think if we look at it every year, that might make sense.
Mr. President.
Councilmember Whitlock.
Garrett, thank you, and appreciate the presentation. And I too think this is a modest increase. Given the time that we've gone without an increase, it is time, and I think something that we absolutely need to consider. We'll hear from the public, but I think they'll look at this and also come to the same conclusion that what we're trying to do is offer an amenity in this community that is in high demand, and we're trying to do it at as reasonable a cost to them as possible. So appreciate the thought that went into all of this, and certainly we'll look deeper and we'll listen to what the public has to say, but thanks for all of the effort. I guess one question is, you know, as you have the Sunday TBD, how is recruitment going in terms of hiring enough people and staffing and being able to maximize the use of the
Councilman Cavanagh, right now we have, I think Willow and I have reviewed 46 applications just for guards right now, and we're still open. We take applications all the way through mid-April. With that, so a lot of the returners trickle in and this and that because they kind of know we don't end the hiring until April. But give them kudos to Willow. She will ping them quite a bit just through text messages, calls, emails, whatever, to, hey, get your stuff in so we can get the ball rolling, paperwork and things like that. So right now, you know, I always worry until we have enough guards, but right now we have, like, I think I said, like 47, 48 guards that have applied. Doesn't mean we're going to hire them all, but we still want guards, and the more guards we have, the more we can be open in theory, right? So I'm not worried yet, but we have quite a few guards available right now. Yeah, thanks for the question.
Garrett, a couple just questions for you. And council, some of you know, I know Garrett knows this. The reason why I'm very passionate about Meridian pools because I want as many kids to learn how to swim in Meridian as possible and provide a very affordable option. And Garrett, I appreciate you've become so, like, presentation been data focused, which helps me kind of look at everything. And I focused a lot on the private swim lessons because that is a high cost to an individual. It only impacts one or sometimes two students. But certainly from the revenue that the city generates, it's the lowest. And I wonder, are we better to suit the needs of our community by having one less private and allowing one additional class, given our space limitations, that allows us to educate more kids, keeps prices low, and actually the city brings in additional revenue? And I don't know if you and your team have discussed that. And listen, one of my kids has benefited from a private lesson, so I found it to be very convenient and beneficial. But when I look at it from a community standpoint, maybe there are other places that may be better suited for a private, more individualized lesson, and us maybe focus on serving as many kids as possible.
Yeah, Councilman Calvert, my response to that is I hear you, and I asked Willow the same questions. It's like, well, can we want to get kids to learn how to swim, right? So I learned a lot just by listening to what Willow says and her expertise in teaching lessons. And the group lessons, we can only fit so many little ones, group ones, the minnows, whatever you want to call them, in the shallow end and so on. We don't have so much space there. So when it comes to the logistics of the scheduling and how many more kids we can get in there, whether we focus more private or public or group lessons, those types of things, we do what we can to bring in the most revenues and fill the pool, if that makes any sense, logistically.
So, Garrett, I guess maybe then what I would suggest is if there's places that I would look at maybe an additional rate increase, it is on the private piece, and using that additional revenue to help, again, to Councilmember Whitlock's question, being able to pay, if we can pay better, more competitive wages, retain more lifeguards, that would be a place that I would focus on. And then something that I would maybe encourage you guys to go back and discuss is, looking at the cost of swim lessons, how recognize we need to do that. Is there a value proposition we can provide our residents, which is maybe it's an increase, whether it's proposed or even slightly higher, but it includes a free day pass so that those that learn how to swim, yes, you're going to spend a little bit more money, but you also are getting an increase in value. So you guys know the operational impact on that better than I. Just want to make sure those are some things that you're considering so that, as we're, we would love to be able to operate as many pools in Meridian at zero cost. We don't have that ability. And so we're trying to be good stewards of the taxpayer dollars. And I would also encourage you, I know that you and your team, and we know what subsidy is. Those are taxpayer dollars. And so I would really encourage you in future reports, let's be pretty transparent about that. That's what the taxpayers are subsidizing the pool in order to be able to operate. I've had some feedback from some folks in our community that maybe take exception with some of the words, and we all have different words that are important to us, but something I would just also encourage you to consider for future reports. Great.
Thank you.
Thanks. With that, you'll bring it back with a public hearing.
In a couple weeks.
We'll get that scheduled as soon as possible for you guys.
Thank you guys very much. Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Garrett. Great. Council, last on our agenda this afternoon is the 2025 Ada County Highway District 5-year plan roadway intersection and community program prioritization. This is a continuation from a conversation a couple weeks ago, and we've got Heather here, so I'll turn over to you, Heather.
Thank you, Council President Cavanagh and Council. I'm back before you to discuss the prioritization process for the 2025 ACHD 5-year plan. Last time we were here, we kind of discussed it. We had a few different kind of parallel conversations happening. I outlined 3 of those in the memo, and before I kind of touch base on those, I want to recognize that I know that there was a discussion about the railroad crossing on Black Cat, and it was just kind of unclear where we want to see that be moved, and I did have a chance to kind of get an update from Council President Cavanagh before this work session, so I did want to preface that. So the 3 other conversations, one was the U-stick and Venable, that you'll see that in Exhibit A, that has been elevated on your list to number 10 on the draft list before you, just trying to kind of move that to somewhere where Parks is somewhat happy with that. We kind of chatted with them. So that was one. We also discussed the Linder Road Cherry to U-stick, recognizing that we are supportive in ACHD being opportunistic in those early acquisitions of affected properties, but that we would deprioritize that to make room for other projects, recognizing that that project as a whole is going to take some time. So those are the ones in Exhibit A. I can stop there, and then we can kind of move on to conversation number 3, the priority corridors. I'll really kind of leave it up to council how you would like to proceed with essentially coming up with a final recommendation, recognizing that this list needs to be turned into ACHD by the 19th. So.
Council, any questions for Heather on, Heather, are you looking for questions about just Exhibit A?
Yeah, I think I'd be asking, is council supportive of, in agreeance with the recommendations for Ustick Venable, understanding that that was a shift based on our conversation previously, as well as the placement of the Linder Road Cherry Lane to Ustick down to number 16?
Mr. President,
Councilmember Whitlock.
I think what was in the packet reflects our discussions, and I think she did a good job of capturing that. There was one element that maybe we need further discussions on to get to ACHD, but
Seeing no questions about Exhibit A, let's continue on.
Okay, great. So Exhibit B, this was really just for conversation purposes. This was to the discussion about, should we identify a priority corridor? Would that be Meridian Road or Locust Grove? So you'll see in Exhibit B, I just used Meridian Road as an example. So you can see the coupling of numbers 12 and 13. That's Meridian, Ustick to McMillan, and Meridian, McMillan to Chinden. If you were to inverse the two and decide that Locust Grove Road be the priority, those numbers would just swap. And I did provide kind of some details from Christy. She's also here today. I included those in your packet just so you can see some of the high level kind of rationale or just input she had as part of that. As staff, we were thinking if we were to proceed with one of those priority corridors, we could always highlight that in our letter as well that we send to ACHD if we want to take a further analysis of those corridors, understanding future right-of-way impacts, et cetera. So those are B and C in your packet, and happy to chat about those as well.
Council, questions?
Council President?
Schrader.
My first question would be, did we get feedback from the fire department about whether the focus should be more on Locust Grove I recall the mayor brought this up in our last meeting that there could be some response time and some other impacts. So I was just curious if we followed up on that.
Thank you, Woman Streeter. We hadn't had an opportunity to really do a deep dive with fire. I did make note that that was the mayor's request that we do. And I think it would be important for staff if we are going to do that and take fire's concerns into consideration, understanding that Locust Grove is a choke point at some points for them to have access. I think we should take everything into consideration. And with that, we can, revisit it this year, work with ACHD and do some more analysis on that. So for now, we have not coordinated with fire. That's not to say that we cannot.
Follow up.
Councilmember Schrader.
So is it staff's recommendation to leave Meridian Road as the, I guess, placeholder priority with this request to ACHD to do the cost analysis of the two alternatives and then do a deeper dive over the next year to look internally and with our partners to figure out what the right, is that the recommendation? Or like, I'm a little nervous about giving the green light on, Meridian Road to be the priority if that's not where we're going to go. But if it's understood that this is here as a placeholder because we need this analysis to be done and it's just not feasible to do the analysis before we transmit the work plan recommendations. Does that kind of summarize your recommendation?
Yes, Councilwoman Streeter and Council. I think our recommendation is, I could go either way. I could just leave it as is and we could spend the year focusing on which priority corridor to do, or we could prioritize Meridian Road, understanding that there is the interchange. I think in looking, I'd have to kind of refamiliarize myself with some of Christie's comments, but that the Meridian corridor and ACHD's portion is fully built out. There's only 2 miles remaining in the corridor. So we could look at it at just that level and be like, that's the one to prioritize. But I believe there's other, it depends on how much data you want to have to make an informed decision. So, I would be comfortable either way. knowing that even if we elevate these two projects this year, we still have an opportunity next year because they're not going to most likely start design on either of those right away.
Okay, yeah, I guess, I understand that perspective. Again, I think the right of way could make a huge difference in the viability of one or the other project. So I think the cost analysis, the cost benefit analysis is really important to pursue. I don't think we want to use a top recommendation spot for something that is not economically viable. So I feel like our letter should strongly highlight the importance of doing this analysis, that we would like to complete one of these corridors to the north all the way to Chinden, and we'd like an analysis, I think, of the two alternatives. I prioritizing Meridian Road, I guess if it's as a placeholder, I'm okay with it, but I feel like with a fire station on that segment of Locust Grove, that does feel like a compelling thing that I want us to look at. So, I guess either way, but I think we need to strongly encourage this analysis to be completed. I don't know what else to say, but
Council, I think maybe my hope would be is that we could put in that request as part of the letter, not knowing how that would be received by our highway district friends, if that's something they would be supportive of, if that helps. They likely are doing some of this. They're not waiting necessarily on all projects to start doing cost analysis. So some of this work may already be in progress and we're just not in the loop on it. So perhaps maybe keeping them as is with a desire to study in collaboration with the highway district over the next year would maybe may be an appropriate request in the letter, unless we are wanting to make some larger shifts in terms of prioritization. What I would caution is us moving stuff this year, then moving them back or moving something else in years to come. We have benefit, I think, by being fairly consistent, kind of outlining those corridors and working through those projects. Not opposed to making a shift now, but I agree with Councilmember Schrader to move something up just to maybe begin a cost analysis at the expense of highlighting another potential project may not be the right use of our small amount of spots. Heather, does that seem doable? That's not something that we've necessarily included in our letter, and I don't want to get out of the scope of what they're expecting, but just trying to figure out the right way to capture, I think, maybe the desire of the council long-term, but wanting to make sure that we've measured twice and cut once before we would move forward.
Council President Cavanagh and Council, I mean, I can't speak to if that would be totally out of scope for the letter. I know last year our letter was a little different anyways, but I can certainly include that and share that. And we can, from what I'm hearing, is just move forward with the Exhibit A priority list and emphasize that we would like to have that coordination for next year's 5-year plan process.
Excellent. And Heather, if we can, I don't want to put Christy on the spot. If you would like to speak to that, you're so kind to join us in person. I don't want to volunteer you to get up and talk to us, but I think your insight and perspective would help us maybe framing our next steps.
Absolutely. I think this is the one. Good evening, President Cavanagh, council members. For the record, Christy Enselman, planning supervisor with ACHD. As soon as you started talking about cost, that is certainly something that we would be happy to provide. We can do a cost analysis, very high level of today's dollars of what each corridor would cost if we're doing a 3 versus a 5 right-of-way expectation. So we do that anyway, especially with our CIP updates. We do cost analysis on all of these corridors anyway, but with the difference of a 3 versus 5, we can give you both.
Okay.
I don't think we can get you those cost analysis before the due date, but we can definitely get those to you in the next month or so, if that would work for council.
Great. Thanks, Christy.
Absolutely.
Council, any questions for Christy? Okay. So Heather, maybe in terms of then of thinking next steps for next year, that I think should be a question maybe before the council is, here's the priorities that have come from the Transportation Commission. Are there any that council would like some cost estimates based on? That way in that kind of period between this first presentation we come back, that gives staff and our friends at the Highway District a little bit more time to give us some of that data. So I will forget, Heather, and I might not be here. And so flagging for you to maybe remind us and give us some good hygiene
Of
next year
course.
when we're back here discussing this. Okay. Council, other questions for Heather? Okay, do you want to continue on then?
Yeah, so I just want to confirm, do we want to continue talking about roads and intersections or switch gears to community programs? Because I want to make sure that I know which exhibit that we are I will be including with the letter. And I believe that would be the exhibit A with U-Stick and then the change with Linder, leaving the rest as is.
Heather, I think council, because you're probably gonna need a motion from us at some point, but I think you're getting the
Okay.
head nods on Exhibit A right now.
That's fine. I just wanted to make sure before we move on. So next, moving on to community programs, I believe the one up for discussion is Black Cat, the railroad crossing, continuing that conversation. The community programs list is the same that was included with your packet on February 25th. So that's where you'll see the community programs. So happy to discuss what council would like to see and if there's any modifications to our list there.
Council, if you would indulge me, I maybe would like to ask Christy to come back up to give us some guidance. All right, Christy, I don't mean to put you on the spot. I've got maybe a question you can help me for some guidance. It's okay. I will ask the question. I haven't even asked it yet. So asking you to come up first. Thank you for coming back up. So Christy, council has discussed, and this will come as no surprise, the best solution to the choke point at Black Cat and the railway. In my conversations with the director, he encouraged that this should become a community program item. If we aren't satisfied in waiting until Black Cat from Cherry to Franklin is built out. I am at least going to propose here in a few minutes that council adds a new community program item designed to address that very issue. Would you mind giving me or the council some flavor of how we should propose that community program to meet the intentions of the council in a way that is conveyed most properly to the highway district?
President Kavanaugh, council members, so it depends, obviously, wherever you landed on the list will speak loudly to us as to what the priorities are of the city. So if that leapfrogs other projects, that's going to tell us that that is a higher priority for the city. I would just be clear in the description, and we work very closely with Heather. If we're unsure of a description, we work very closely. I come to these meetings so that I can get clarity on what you're looking for. So just high level, what it is that you're hoping to achieve is generally the best way to give us a description of your project. Are you looking for, not for this one, but you're looking for bike ped, filling gaps, addressing maybe a signalization, something at the railroad, whatever it is that you're hoping to achieve with the project is what I would put as your description.
Great. So I may ask if, as we are discussing that here in a minute, if you've got a concern or a question or clarification, feel free to wave your hands and we would be happy to make sure that there is good clarity. Should this be something that the council wants to engage in?
Absolutely.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions, programs for Christy while we've got her up here? I know she's getting her steps with us today. Okay. Thank you. So council, I sent you guys all an email last night. I would like to establish a new community program around addressing the choke point at the stop sign at the Black Cat Railroad. Perhaps if staff is comfortable, leaving it to them to wordsmith it in the most appropriate manner. But it would be my intention that we would yield somewhat to the highway district about the most efficient way to do that. There's lots of different ways to satisfy this, from crossing arms to just removing the stop sign and replacing it with a flashing beacon or a non-flashing beacon. I wouldn't want to be so prescriptive in adding this that it would limit whatever the highway district thinks is best. I just want to be able to move vehicles in the most efficient manner across the railway on Black Cat. I would, if I were to make a motion, I would ask the council to at least be open-minded to having that community program land in the top 3 or top 5. Just to that point, because I think it is a bigger issue. And to Christy's points, I would like us to make a statement. Hey, this is a bigger priority. We would like to have the highway district place some attention to. So I don't know if I summarized that well in my email to you all last night. I'm happy to answer any questions if you may have about that. or if there's any other items that are here as community programs that we also feel should be highlighted. I don't want my enthusiasm about this project to overshadow any other priorities that any of you may have had or heard from people in your community.
Council President.
Councilmember Schrader.
Isn't I think the concern, at least I've heard articulated around this area, wasn't just an issue with vehicles necessarily, it was really, I thought, pedestrian issue primarily. And it has been a consistent problem for us that we've all talked about. So I am supportive of it being in the top 5. Top 3, I think there's an argument for it. But that's kind of where I'm at, just from a high level. It just feels like it's an unsafe enough set of conditions that we need something to happen here faster than the highway district is currently planning. So I think if we could signal that to them, I think that would be a good thing. Like, to me, this is a priority. I think it's important that we find a resolution on it.
Mr. Council President,
Councilmember Overton.
seems like we had this conversation a year ago when we were trying to determine between 3 agencies who would take the lead on having this happen and if we waited for it to be part of the entire road project or not. The road project is so many years down the road, and the extreme need for the stop sign to go away and a signal to go in to try to move that traffic every day because of the location of the school.
Yeah.
I have fully supportive of bringing it into the top 5.
Excellent. Then, are there any other movements or questions on, I know we didn't discuss a lot of community programs a few weeks ago. Any other comments or questions about any other community programs that are listed in the memo from Heather?
Mr. Council President,
Councilmember Overton.
the one I don't want to see displaced because it's been displaced so many times before is the one that currently sits as number 2.
Yep.
I consistently hear from folks that live in that area that are elderly that cannot walk on sidewalks that go to nowhere. And it's finally up at this position. The roadway again will not be done for several years. So I guess besides just saying in the top 5, maybe if it could come in number 3 behind that one, that would be a good placement for me.
Councilmember Overton, you are certainly anticipating where I had planned to, if I were to make a motion where I would place this. I think number 3 is the most appropriate one, and certainly 2, I think have been kind of evergreen issues that we've looked to address. So I'm happy to, I guess I'm a chair, so I'm not going to make any motions, but if someone were to make a motion to have, adding the choke point mitigation at the Black Cat Railroad as community program number 3, that would be in line with where I guess my recommendation would be.
Mr. President,
Councilmember Willock.
I'm happy to make that motion to make the choke point correction at Black Cat and the railway a top 3 priority, coming in at number 3.
And I haven't got a second yet, but are you planning to also make your motion to include that we include Exhibit A for the roadway priorities and to send a letter to Highway District communicating that, as well as our desire for more information on cost related to transportation?
Mr. President, you read my mind. I was going to include all of that.
Second.
There is a moved and seconded discussion for the council. Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Chair is an aye. Any nays? All right, motion passes. Heather, that makes sense for you. And if you need clarification, we're happy to chat.
Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, Christy, for being here. Thank you, Heather, for that presentation. Council, that concludes our work session. We do have on our agenda an executive session.
Council President Cavanagh.
Councilmember Schrader.
I move that we go into executive session per Idaho Code 74-2061B.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Mr. Clerk, please call roll.
Thank you, Mr. President. Cavanagh,
Aye.
Little Roberts.
Aye.
Overton.
Aye.
Strader,
Aye.
Whitlock.
All right, we're in executive session. Okay, council, we're, motion to come out of executive session.
Second.
Oh.
I move that we come out of executive session.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
There's aye as well. We're out of executive session.
Council President Kavner,
Councilor Schrader.
I move that we adjourn the meeting.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Here's aye as well. We have adjourned our work session. Chris, we ready just to jump right in? Great. Good evening. It is 6:01 on March 11th, the time we have noticed for our Meridian City Council meeting. We'll begin tonight's agenda with roll call attendance. Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Councilman Cavanagh.
Here.
Councilwoman Little Roberts.
Here.
Councilman Overton.
Here.
Councilman Whitlock.
Here.
Councilwoman Strainer.
Great. Next up is the Pledge of Allegiance. We all stand and join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Council, I know our community invocation speaker was unable to make it this evening, so with that, we'll move to the adoption of the agenda.
Council President,
Councilmember Schrader.
one small change, we'll go ahead and vacate the last item, the executive session per Idaho Code 742061B. We've already completed that. With that change, I move that we adopt the amended agenda.
Second.
Seconded, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Chair is an aye, and the motion passes. Public forum. Mr. Johnson, has anyone signed up to testify this?
Mr. President, there are no signups.
All right. Moving right along then to action items. First up is item number 1. This is a public hearing for ordinance 25-2075. We'll turn this over, I assume, to you, Mr. Neri?
Yes, Councilmember Cavanagh. So this is the second opportunity for the public to weigh in. This is a code update that we've done. We've done a couple presentations. We'd had a public hearing last week for an opportunity. Basically, this is an update to our city code in relation to our commissions and committees and memberships and how the operations of those all function, and a few other changes within the Title I. But other than that, fairly mundane types of changes. But this was just a second opportunity in case there was anyone from the public. We haven't received any written comments that I'm aware of, or any additional comments since the presentation.
Great. With that, then, Mr. Johnson, has anyone signed up to provide any testimony?
Mr. President, no.
We do have the second and third combined reading as an ordinance later on in our agenda. Council, what's your pleasure?
Council President,
Councilmember Overton.
I move that we continue the public hearing for ordinance 25-2075 until next week, March 18th, 2025.
Mr. President? Yep. Mr. President, members of Councilmember Overton, we could actually close the hearing tonight if you wish and do the second and third reading and approve the ordinance if you'd like to.
Council President, I'd like to withdraw that motion.
Unless there's objection, we're good with that. Perhaps a new motion?
President, new motion.
Councilmember Overton.
Like to combine the second and third readings this evening and close the public hearing for ordinance 25-2075.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Chair is aye, and the motion passes. So we will close that public hearing, and we will take up the ordinance reading later on in our ordinance section. Next is item number 2. This is a public hearing for 965 East U Stick Road by Muscle Corp Construction. We'll turn this over to staff. Sonia, I think you're up first.
Thank you. First application before you tonight is a request for annexation and zoning. This site consists of 0.9 acres of land. It's zoned R1 in Ada County and is located at 965 East Ustick Road. The comprehensive plan future land use map designation is medium density residential. Dwelling units at a density of 3 to 8 units per acre are typically desired in this designation. However, the comprehensive plan does state that at the discretion of City Council, areas with a residential comprehensive plan designation may request an office use if the property only has frontage on an arterial street or section line road and is 2 acres or less in size. In this instance, no ancillary commercial uses are permitted. The subject property meets the criteria. This caveat applies solely to office uses. Per the UDC, office use is classified as professional services and healthcare or social services and does not include other non-office uses typically allowed in the LO district. The applicant is requesting annexation of 1.11 acres of land with an LO zoning district. A conceptual development plan was submitted as shown for the expansion of the existing 2,259 square foot home to an 8,000 square foot multi-tenant building with associated parking, drive aisles, walkways, and landscaping. As noted, it's at the City Council's discretion to approve the requested LO zoning in the medium density residential future land use designation. One access is proposed for the site via East Ustick Road and Arterial Street. No other accesses are available to this site from adjacent properties. 25-foot wide landscape street buffer is required along Ustick Road, and a 20-foot wide landscape buffer to residential uses is required in the LO district along the west, south, and east boundaries of the site. The applicant requests City Council approval of a reduced buffer width to residential uses from 20 feet to 8 feet 10 inches along the west boundary of the site. The required buffer is provided along the south and east boundaries of the site. Conceptual building elevations, perspectives were submitted as shown for the proposed addition to the existing structure. The commission recommended approval with the development agreement that limits future use of the property to professional services and healthcare or social services. Kent Mussel, the applicant, testified in favor at the commission hearing. No one testified in opposition. Todd Powell commented on the application, and written testimony was received from the applicant, Kent Mussel, in agreement with the staff recommendation. There was one item of discussion from Todd Powell. He had questions pertaining to the width of the buffer proposed along the southern boundary of the site and activity on the property to the east under the same ownership. Staff confirmed the reduced buffer width is only requested along the west boundary of the site. The buffer width along the southern boundary exceeds the minimum required buffer width at almost 30 feet. The applicant stated they're planning to flip the residential house on the adjacent property to the east and that they have no intention of it being part of this development. The commission had no changes to the staff recommendation. The only outstanding issue for council tonight is the applicant's request for a reduced buffer to residential uses along the west boundary. There has been no written testimony since the commission hearing. Staff will stand for any questions. The applicant is here tonight.
Council, any questions for staff?
Council President,
Councilman Schrader.
just wanted to double check that the west boundary buffer reduction was 10 feet, 8 inches and not 8 feet.
Councilwoman Strader, I really, did I say 10? It's 8 feet, 10 inches. Did I say that backwards?
So you mentioned 8 feet.
Oh, I did say it backwards. 8 feet, 10 inches.
So it is 8 feet, not 10 feet.
8 feet, 10 inches. I'll have the applicant confirm that.
Okay,
I'll
yeah,
look in my staff report as well, but I did say that
yep.
different ways.
I have the staff report in my
We'll
computer
confirm
too. I
that.
could, find it. Okay.
Thank you.
Council, any additional questions? Sonia, the amount of parking that this project is slated to have, is that the amount of slots that are required because of the zone, or is this built out as more parking than's required and is required?
There is more parking than is required, I believe. I can get those exact numbers. They're in the staff report. A minimum of 16 spaces are required, and a total of 37 spaces are proposed.
10.
Thank you, Sonia. I appreciate that.
And then, just to confirm, the buffer width they're requesting is 8 feet, 10 inches. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Sonia. All right, if there's no any questions for staff, we'll invite the applicant up. Is the applicant here? Good evening, sir. Thank you for joining us this evening. If you could please state your name and address, and you're recognized for 15 minutes.
Good evening, council. My name is Kent Mussel. My address is 1209 North Meadow Glen Avenue. That's here in Meridian. And I'm representing Mussel Construction. We're the developer for this project. Last year, we brought a similar version of this project before council. I think some of you were here and might remember that. That proposal was similar to this one. It was for a local charter school, Pathways in Education. At that time, our hearing was continued. Ada County Highway District had been significantly delayed in providing a report on that project, which was the main thing that we needed for council to be able to vote. And that was a requirement that we have that by Idaho statute. In the interim, Pathways needed a location by fall of last year in order to fulfill the requirements of their charter. And so we had to change their plans. We got them moved to Boise, kind of by the Y. But as a result of those changes, the project was canceled and we withdrew that application. The key difference in our current proposal is that Pathways is no longer the intended tenant. Despite that change, our building and design remain very similar. We intend to develop the existing home on the 1 acre parcel for light office use. Our proposal includes renovating and expanding the existing structure, resulting in a total area of approximately 8,000 square feet. We are seeking annexation into Meridian under the limited office zone, and we agree with staff's requirement that a development agreement be included to restrict the uses to professional services or healthcare offices or social services. And then, as was mentioned, we are requesting that reduced landscape buffer. I don't know if we can see it on the site plan here. Let's see. That west boundary is a irregular shape, and so let's see if I can get to that page. There we go. The narrowest point of that boundary is at 8'10", and really the issue here is that with the required parking dimensions and the existing structure, that it is what it is without demolishing the existing structure. I think that's all I have to say for the moment. I'll yield my time and I'll stay available for any questions.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Musil. Council, any questions for the applicant?
Mr. President.
Councilmember Roberts.
Mr. President, Kent, thank you for being here. From our last conversation, probably the biggest current concern with council was the traffic coming in and out, especially because I think the school kind of had certain times that there would be more traffic. Does doing this building differently mitigate that time frame with a lot of traffic going in and out at the same time? Are you looking at enough multiple tenants that maybe things will be spread out more traffic wise?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think a big difference here is that, a school is going to have a much higher occupant load than an office would. And we're seeing like a dentist office or a law office or something like that in this location. We're just trying to kind of salvage the investment that we have here. And so we don't have a tenant yet. We kind of want to get the shell building built and then advertise for tenants here. But we have the restrictions in place. I do have some footage of the traffic on Ustick in this area, if you guys want to see that. I mean, maybe I'll save that until after public testimony, unless you guys request it. Yeah, I think with office use, it's just, a much smaller number of people coming to and from the property. And I remember a year ago, a big discussion was about the specific people that were coming to and from the property. There was concern about kids in particular driving to and from the property. With that said, I think that's a good reason why this property is uniquely suited for light office use. Homes have kids driving to and from them also. And it's true that this building is like something like 30 feet away from Ustick Road. And it is a busy road. The speed limit is 40 miles an hour. Hope that answers some of the question.
It does. Thank you.
Council, additional questions? Mr. Musil, I do have one. I wasn't tracking necessarily with why the request for the reduced landscape buffer along the west. You said you've got some challenges with the corner. Can you maybe walk me through what these challenges are?
Sure, yeah. So, the minimum dimensional standards, Sonia could probably remind us what those are, but I believe it's like 18 or 19 feet deep for your parking stalls plus 25-foot drive aisle if you have two-way traffic. We need a minimum of a 5-foot sidewalk up against the building. And you can see that that's basically what we've provided here. So the landscape buffer is really just what's left over by the time you include all of those elements. The only other solution would be to reduce the parking. And actually, I wonder if I can address Sonia, because I didn't quite hear the minimum required parking here.
16.
Oh, 16.
Sorry, I didn't mean to. Yeah, I try very rarely to speak for our staff.
yeah, it was minimum 16.
Yeah, we can reduce parking in order to maybe get a little more buffer along that west boundary. Like I said, the southern portion of it is the 8'10" portion of it, and the northern portion is larger than that. One thing I will note is that the people we've had meet with us and comment with us, they have never been from the western boundary of our property. I've spoken extensively with the people to the south who've attended our first neighborhood meeting. And we've had people from across the street present at most of the meetings that we've had. But as far as I'm aware, I've not heard from anyone to the west.
Council, any additional questions? Thank you, Mr. Mussel. We'll probably be back up here in a minute. This is a public hearing. Mr. Johnson, do we have anyone to speak on this application this evening?
Mr. President, yes, one, Lindy Bauer.
Excellent. If you would mind joining us up here, come on up. That's okay. You know what? You're going to have a blast. So what we'll have you do is we'll have you come up to the microphone. Just pick any one microphone and you kind of have to eat it. And if you would do us the favor of telling us your name and your address, and you have 3 minutes to share your perspective. And when you exceed 3 minutes, you'll hear a little beep, beep, and that means it's time to wrap things up.
Okay, my name, am I ready?
Please go for it.
My name is Lindy Bauer. Ooh, I don't need to be that close. My address is 3096 North Timber Falls Way, directly behind that property. Our parking lot is directly behind that property. Their parking lot is directly behind it. It's right at our border. So I was concerned when I read that he wanted to change the setback, and very concerned because it's 8 feet. They already took down all the trees. So Ustick Road is just right there now. But anyway, I'm not objecting to him doing what he's doing, except for I don't want to be moved. I don't want any lot lines. What is it? I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I want it to be 20 feet away from me, at least, with trees and fence. And that's the end of my story.
Council, any questions? I have one, if that's
okay.
Thank you for being here tonight.
Yeah.
What I heard your concern that you were conveying was that you have some concerns about the reduced landscape buffer and how that impacts your home. And you want to make sure that no lot lines are adjusted as a result of this particular project.
Right, because we really are very close to this property. So I am concerned about that because when we go to sell our property, that's not good. It's already not good. We used to, but we love our house. But I just want to be sure it stays. I don't mind what he's doing. I just don't want lesser land there, That's all.
Well, thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you for providing your testimony. You're welcome to sit back down and we'll have the applicant come back up and, I saw more questions. Sorry. Councilmember Little Roberts.
Sorry, Mr. President. Lindy, can you still see on the screen the picture that we're looking at?
Yes,
So my question is, it looks like there's like 3 trees there. Is that
Yes,
where you're?
exactly. And I'm right behind that.
But it looks different now? The trees are gone or those trees?
Those trees aren't there.
So the landscaping isn't done yet?
No, oh no, nothing's been done like that.
Because from my understanding, and the applicant can clarify, I think it's the side one that is getting to be smaller rather than one between your property.
That's what I want to make sure of, and I appreciate you asking that because I'm here to make sure that ours doesn't get lessened. We need that space in there.
And that, to me, on the map, looks like that is remaining, but when the applicant comes back up, we will make sure that is
Thank you.
clarified.
That's what I'm trying to figure out. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Sonia, did you have anything you wanted to add before we?
I
see if there's-
do, thank you. I actually looked up Ms. Bauer's property and she is directly to the south at the southwest corner of the site. So she does have approximately 27 feet of landscaping in between their rear property line and this property's rear property line. Thank you.
Mr. Johnson, is there anybody else that signed up to testify?
Mr. President, no.
Okay, this is a public hearing. If there's anybody else here in the room or online that would like to testify, you're welcome to join us up front or use the raise your hand feature on Teams. And I haven't looked there, so I'm gonna make sure. Okay, nobody is raising their hand online. Nobody's wrestling to get up here to the front. Mr. Muscle, would you like to provide any closing comments?
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that Lindy came up to testify. Regarding the trees along the south boundary, there was a tree, you can actually see the outline of it. There was actually a larger tree on that south boundary, and we pruned it a couple times, and it ended up dying, so we had to remove it. We are planting new trees along that south boundary where those 3 trees are shown. So this landscaping plan is mostly new landscaping. Our instructions to our landscaping designer was we want to screen those existing homes as much as possible. That's primarily achieved through like evergreen, like like skyrocket juniper type things that get big and bushy and block the view as much as possible. This fence that you see on the screen, that was something I had shown to Lindy specifically in our meeting, in the neighborhood meeting. Because that was like the main focus of that meeting was what kind of fence can we have that would screen between this property and the neighboring properties. So this is something we committed to them to do in that meeting, and it seemed to be acceptable at that time. And I think that's all I have left to add.
Thank you, Mr. Muscle. Council, additional questions for the applicant?
Mr. President,
Councilmember Whitlock.
just a quick question on the southeast boundary, moving north. That doesn't quite appear on this schematic to be 20 feet where the parking lot is.
Yeah, so I think that's just a leftover artifact from, at one point we had a condition on the staff report to stub cross access to the east property. That went away when we updated our landscaping plan. They didn't eliminate enough of it, but we will achieve the 20-foot buffer on the east boundary.
And Mr. President, just to follow up.
Councilmember Whitlock, please.
And so this type of fence would go on 3 sides of the property?
That is
South
our
and
plan,
east.
yeah.
Council, any additional questions? Mr. Muscle, I think stays kind of in the landscape, the reduced landscape buffer request to the west, and your indication that you would maybe be open to reducing your amount of parking. Is that something you're supportive of doing? Is it something you're, would do it if we weren't going to waive your request? And I think at least where I come from is I was supportive of doing some modifications when we knew what was coming in. We knew it was going to be a school, and some of those requests in my opinion, needed to be accepted to help support the goal of the school and the operational plan of the school. Where this right now is a shell, it's hard for me to say this, not needing that, or supporting a reduced landscape buffer makes sense because of what was going to be operating or hours, what's going to be going on there, the noise it's going to generate. Not knowing makes me a little reluctant to grant a reduced landscape buffer. I recognize you're trying to build this to invite somebody to come in. But do you feel like that you're going to need all of that parking? I would rather have there be landscape than asphalt that's not going to go used. If you've got a use that's going to require more than the minimum required amount of parking for this facility, I'm interested in learning more.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not anticipating a use that would require the 37 spaces. I do think if we eliminated all of the west boundary parking, that would be potentially a problem because that's a lot of parking spaces. I'm wondering if we could maybe do something in the middle, like approve the reduced landscape buffer for maybe a portion of the west property, maybe 50% of it or something like that. I do have my partner here. I should check with him just to make sure we're all in agreement on whether that's something we're willing to do. Do you mind if we have that conversation? Sure. Okay.
Give you a couple of minutes to confer, and I can at least maybe share some thoughts with council and buy you a couple of minutes, so no problem.
Council President,
Councilmember Woodruff.
just a comment while they're back there working, just looking at the parking to the south and up against the building, I believe it still is about 22 spots, which exceeds the city's required 16.
Yeah, Councilmember Overton, you were, I think, doing the same exercise I was, which was maybe hand counting to make sure that we would still meet our minimum threshold. Council, where I think is, you kind of see at the bottom where the landscape buffer goes, what I think is probably close to the 20 feet. And so it gives you some sense about how far it could go. I recognize that the applicant's trying to get two-way access. And certainly the asphalt helps to create space, certainly between the building use and the residential neighbors. If given the choice between landscape or unused asphalt, I'm going to choose landscape. But Mr. Mussel's back and may have some more insight for us.
Yeah, so I know adding conditions from the dais is a little bit not ideal, but I think we'd be able to work with 10 feet in some portions of this. And I think, if we can maybe restrict that 8 foot 10 to just a portion of it, I think we would be okay with that. So maybe say, just approve the reduced landscape buffer to 8 foot 10 and 50% of the west boundary, and then the other 50%, maybe we go with 10 feet. I'm just trying to think of ways to increase the landscaping requirements there without, compromising the viability of the project.
Council President.
Councilmember Strader.
Mr. Mussel, I think it would help, would you refresh our memory as to who your neighbors are to the west, what feedback you've had, how have you tried to reach out to them to dialogue?
Yeah, so I guess I did misspeak a second ago. We have one neighbor to the west. At the very southern corner to the west, we have a neighbor. Her name's Kathy. She has always been really easy to work with and supportive of the project. And, she asked us to trim those trees back there a number of times, and we've done that. And actually, she has the 20 foot next to her property anyway. North of that, those neighbors have had ample opportunity. So they've had notifications for 2 neighborhood meetings, for the previous project and for this project. They've had, and our planning and zoning hearing last time was continued like 2 or 3 times. So they had, a handful of planning and zoning public hearings that they could have attended. They could have attended the last planning and zoning public hearing, and then the 2 city council public hearings that we've had. And we just haven't heard from them. So, yeah, that's kind of the extent of the opportunity that they've had. But yeah, like most of our discussion has been with our neighbors to the south, including Lindy and Todd. And then we've also, heard a lot from the neighbors across Ustick Road.
Okay, thank you.
Council, any additional questions? All right. Thank you very much, Ms. Mussel. Council, just for the record, I was curious, so I did type in the address into Google Maps so I could see kind of what surrounds. And at least on my screen, there's a house that what is maybe called 3150 Timber Falls Way that has a pool that is right up next to the landscape, would be the landscape buffer. At least gives me a little flavor. There's not a residential use that's right up against it, but at least some outdoor recreation space that would be right up against it. Council? Review, deliberation? Additional questions for staff? How would you like to best move forward?
Council President.
Councilmember Schrader.
I'd be happy to share my thoughts. I'm actually not as bothered about the reduced landscape buffer at this point on the west side. Actually just based a little bit on the satellite photo actually, as well as, again, I feel like the neighbors have had a lot of opportunities to weigh in and share their opinion. It looks to me like the landscaping, at least the plantings and stuff that'll go in will help quite a bit. Yeah, so I don't feel as much of a need to reduce the parking necessarily on the west side personally at this point. I also feel like this is a much less intensive use than a school, which is what we were looking at here before. I feel like this is kind of a win-win from the neighbor's perspective actually compared to, again, it would have been a lot of intensive traffic at different times. Now you're going to hopefully have more of a drip through kind of consistently throughout the day. But if it does end up being a dentist office or an attorney or something, I think that seems like a really good fit compared to the school. So I'm very supportive of the project as it was presented.
President,
Councilmember Overton.
while I was willing to help the applicant reduce some of his parking spaces, that was never a make or break it for me on this application. I prefer this over what we saw last time. I think it's going to flow better. I think it's going to have much better times for how traffic comes and goes from this type of a business than we would have had before. And I'm supportive of it at this point.
Council President Kavner.
Council Vice President Schrader.
I would be happy to make a motion that we close the public hearing at this time.
Motion to close the public hearing. Motion is seconded. Any discussion? All in favor of closing the public hearing, say aye.
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 Any opposed? The chair is an aye as well, and we have closed our public hearing.
Council President Kavner.
So Vice President Schrader.
Just a couple thoughts and then I'll make a motion to approve. Again, it feels like a nice project. I'm sorry that your other project fell through, but I think it actually works to the community's benefit overall. So with that, after considering all staff, applicant, and public testimony, I move to approve file number H 2024-0063 as presented in the staff report for today's hearing date, with the additional modification noting that the city council will approve a reduced buffer to residential uses along the western boundary of the site from 20 feet to 8 feet 10 inches. Also noting that the applicant will be planting, following the landscaping plan and planting the new trees on the southern border. And in addition to that, that they will be providing the fencing as described along the west, southern, and eastern boundaries of the property.
Council President, just a
Councilmember Overton.
comment before we get a second.
Need
Did the-
the chair typically doesn't second for the sake of conversation. If maybe Councilmember Overton, if you'd make the second and then for discussion.
Second for discussion.
Councilmember Overton.
Would the motion maker like to also include that the DA needs to include that all future use is limited to professional services, healthcare, and social services?
Absolutely. Could not hurt the situation. Thank you.
Second agrees.
Got a motion and a second for a modified motion. Any further discussion from council? All right, Mr. Clerk, please call roll.
Thank you, Mr. President. Cavanagh,
No.
Little Roberts,
Aye.
Overton,
Aye.
Strader,
Aye.
Whitlock.
Aye.
4 ayes, 1 no, and the item passed. Thank you all for being here this evening. We'll now move on to our last action item for the evening, a public hearing for Soldier Place subdivision, SHP 2024-0002. We'll begin this application with some amazing staff comments. Linda, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. I love that introduction. So tonight we are here, have a request for a short plat to subdivide an existing parcel into 3 buildable lots on 0.47 acres of land in the R15 zoning district that is located at 1323 Second and a Half Street. There it is. The applicant intends to retain the existing single-family attached home on 2 lots and construct an additional single-family detached home and a secondary dwelling unit above the detached garage. um, on the newly created lot. The lots range in size from 3,866 square feet to 6,268 square feet, resulting in a project density of 8.47 dwelling units per acre. Access to the property is provided from a common driveway via 2.5 Street, and the primary residence proposed for Lot 1 will take access from 2.5 Street as shown on this common drive exhibit. So it looks like the applicant is proposing a detached garage with a 800 square foot secondary dwelling unit above that garage. So the applicant will be required to submit an application for this secondary dwelling to be reviewed and approved, as it is not part of this application. The applicant will be required to comply with specific use standards for secondary dwelling, and compliance with these requirements will occur at the building permit submittal. These are pictures of the property as is now. So this house is not part of the development, but these are the homes that have been built on the property that will be subdivided. And this is a Lot 1. And this is the common drive that goes to those properties. And this is kind of a better view of that property. Pretty straightforward what is being requested. In talking with the applicant, they are in agreement with the staff report. So at this time, I will take any questions that council may have.
Great. Thank you, Linda. Council questions? Not seeing any. I see the applicant is here. Good evening, Mr. Brown. Welcome. State your name and address, and 15 minutes is for you.
I guess I'm supposed to eat this, is what I heard here in the meeting. Kent Brown, 3161 East Springwood, Meridian, Idaho. Soldier Place. I just asked my client, I said, why did you pick this name? And he has a grandson and a son, both of them recently in the military, recently come back, and they're going to live here. I would say that that's probably the reason that he's been willing to kind of endure this process. As you're well aware, I do lots of subdivisions, and this has been one of the most difficult ones I've done. Which you would think for an infill where we're trying to get one more lot, that it wouldn't be that big a deal. And it's not Linda. You know, Linda is kind of a troublemaker, but she hasn't been on this case. What it is that this area is in flux. So it's down the street from Cole Christian. There's no sidewalk in the area. They want sidewalk. And yet the plan is to rip up the street and put sewer in it. And today, the sewer runs behind that existing building that is in the west side of the site that is at the end of the Hammerhead turnaround. So we used to call them alley sewers. It's clay pipe and not in the best condition. And the condition, as we talked with Public Works, was that they wanted a sewer line to go out to 2.5 Street, where they're not going to be for 6+ years for that to be done. And, you know, how do you do that? So with some creativity, we're going to go connect to that sewer and allow the homes that are existing and the proposed one on the other lot to service off of the alley. At the same time, someday in the future, 2031, when they finally get the street out to 2.5 Street, we over here, can you do it for me, Linda? We're going to go the part that's not a part of our development. We're going to go down that street and we're going to run a sewer line out to 2.5 Street. So that sewer line will be active for the portion that's up next to the existing building. And then in the future, we'll put a plug in, not connect to the one that's behind us, and come out to the street. So either Mr. Hill and I are two old men that, get a project and we're trying to move forward, but this has had a lot of challenges. A lot more expensive than I think either one of us thought that it would be. Putting in a sewer line, there's an existing one. We expected just to connect to the old one. We didn't know anything about the future sewer going in. And so we've been working with Public Works over and over again. And we've designed the sewer. Public Works likes it. We've designed our frontage with ACHD, and they promise that they're not going to rip up our sidewalk someday in the future, which I didn't notice that taking place in downtown Meridian. And what other renovations to your sewer system, water system down, but we'll see. It's been a challenge. We're in agreement with the conditions of approval, and ask that you approve it so that he can get building permit and get his son on that property that's not built, and allow his grandson already lives there. So.
Thank you. Council, any questions for the applicant? All right, not seeing any questions. Grab a
Thank
seat.
you.
We'll call you back up here in a minute. This is a public hearing. Mr. Johnson, do we have anybody who signed up to testify?
Mr. President, we did not.
Okay. Not seeing anyone signed up to testify. This is a public hearing. Is there anybody in the room or online that would like to testify? If so, please come up to the podium or use the raise your hand feature online. Not seeing anyone. Mr. Brown, any final comments? Waive final comments? What would you like to do? Sounds like the applicant's waiving final comments, so council, will turn it over to you.
Mr. President,
Mr. Overton.
I do notice that we have Public Works in the house. And I don't know if they could go over from the city view of everything that Kent has just explained to us and tell us if everything that Kent just told us matches up with the city's plan in the future.
Good evening, Warren. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilman Cavanagh and rest of you councilmen and women. And I'm more than happy to answer any questions that you may have on this. And yes, everything that Kent said is pretty consistent. I didn't hear anything as I was walking down here, but other than that, it's pretty consistent. We do have a project in the 10-year CFP to put a brand new sewer line down 2.5 Street. The existing sewer line is in, and I wouldn't even call it an alleyway, it's just in the backyards of the existing houses along there, and we don't even have an easement through some of that. So our ability to operate and maintain that into the future is not good at all. So we are going to replace that at some point in the future. That was a concern when these came in because they wanted to get sewer service. The only service we had at the moment was that very dilapidated and difficult sewer that was going to be eliminated. And they have worked with us to find a temporary solution to allow them to connect to that, but also to find a permanent solution that will allow them pretty seamlessly to go back out into 2.5 Street as soon as we get that done. So I'll stand for any questions that you may have.
Thanks, Warren.
Mr. President.
Councilman Overton.
So Warren, I really want to just make sure that while we're all in the room together, that we all understand that we're looking at an application that's going off a very old sewer line, and that it's going to be a number of years before we get a new state-of-the-art sewer line that we would then have them hook up to. So that was the main reason I wanted you to come up, is to reiterate where we're at, how we're doing it, and the fact that it's going to take a number of years before we get that sewer line built. I appreciate it.
Council President Warren, if you don't mind staying for a second.
Councilmember.
Just wanted to make sure you're comfortable that the conditions of approval cover us in terms of that transition at the appropriate time when we do bring the sewer line, that they will connect?
Yeah, they're gonna actually stub it clear out to the right of way. So when the city builds the sewer main, we'll build the connection, the piece that connects to them, so.
Perfect. Thank you.
Any additional questions? All right, thanks, Warren. Appreciate it. All right, council? Any further questions for staff? Motion's always in order.
Mr. President,
Councilmember Roberts.
Mr. President, I would move that we close the public hearing.
Second.
Move a second, we close the public hearing. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Chair is aye, and the motion passes.
Mr. President,
Councilmember Little Roberts.
if we don't have any discussion, I would move that we approve Soldier Place subdivision 2024-0002 with staff and our comments.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any discussion? I'll just say, I always look for an opportunity to vote no on an application Mr. Brown brings. I was moved to do that when he tried to poke a joke at me while I'm trying to chair the meeting, but this project means a lot to you, sir, so I'll keep my personal opinions to myself. Mr. Johnson, feel free to call roll.
Thank you, Mr. President. Cavanagh.
Aye.
Little Roberts.
Aye.
Overton.
Aye.
Strater.
Aye.
Whitlock.
Aye.
All ayes, and the motion passes. Thank you all for being with us this evening. Good luck with your project. Moving on to our ordinance section, item 4. Second and third reading of ordinance 25-2075. Mr. Johnson, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is an ordinance repealing and replacing Title II of Meridian City Code regarding commissions and committees, amending Meridian City Code Section 165 regarding compensation committee, amending Meridian City Code Section 179 regarding compensation committee, repealing Meridian City Code Section 1711 regarding Meridian Districting Committee and City Council districts, repealing Meridian City Code Section 10711 regarding Impact Fee Advisory Committee, repealing conflicting ordinances and providing an effective date.
We've all had the chance to hear this introduced. Would anybody like to hear this ordinance read in its entirety? Not for a motion?
Mr. President,
Councilmember Overton.
this was a combined reading of second and third reading of this ordinance, and at this moment, I'd like to make a motion to approve ordinance 25-2075.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Just real quick, council, I want to commend you and our legal staff on this. I think we've moved into a very good process with these code changes, giving ample time to review, ample time for the public to provide feedback. I know it is probably not efficient from a time standpoint. I feel like we've been talking about this one for months, but I think a slow and steady pace is the appropriate approach. Just want to thank you for being supportive of that. With that, Mr. Clerk, feel free to call roll.
Thank you, Mr. President. Cavanagh.
Aye.
Little Roberts.
Aye.
Overton.
Aye.
Strater.
Aye.
Whitlock.
All ayes, motion passes. Move on to item 5, ordinance 25-2077. Turn this over to Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's an ordinance related to Addison Circle subdivision H 2024-0040, annexing a parcel of land located in the northeast quarter of Section 33, Township 4 North, Range 1 West, Boise, Meridian, Ada County, Idaho, more particularly described in Exhibit A. Rezoning 1.87 acres of such real property from RUT to R8 zoning district, directing city staff to alter all applicable use and area maps, as well as the official maps and zoning maps and all official maps depicting the boundaries and the zoning districts of the city of Meridian in accordance with this ordinance, providing that copies of this ordinance shall be filed with the Ada County Assessor, the Ada County Treasurer, the Ada County Recorder, and the Idaho State Tax Commission as required by law, repealing conflicting ordinances and providing an effective date.
Had the opportunity to hear this is introduced by our clerk. Anybody like this ordinance read its entirety? Seeing none, council for a motion.
Mr. President,
Councilmember Overton.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve ordinance number 25-2077.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Mr. Johnson, feel free to call roll.
Thank you, Mr. President. Cavanagh.
Aye.
Little Roberts.
Aye.
Overton.
Aye.
Strater.
Aye.
Whitlock.
Aye.
All ayes, the motion passes. Future meeting topics. Council have anything flagged? Okay, council, maybe just 2 quick indulgences, if you will. Just want to commend our police and fire. We've been getting updates about the many calls that you guys have been on the past couple of weeks. I know that you guys are being sought for your help and assistance on a fairly more frequent beyond regular basis. Just want to pass on our appreciation to you and your colleagues for all the great work that you do. And then council, just real quick, this wasn't gonna get me going. Wow. Tomorrow is, did not expect this. My son's 18th birthday. And when I came to the very first work at the city, it was just 18 months. And it's hard to believe that tomorrow he'll turn 18. And wow, this was not expected. Apologies. I just want to wish my son a very happy 18th birthday. So thank you for that, council. Wow, I did not realize I was going to need tissues tonight. But we vacated the executive session. So council, a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
Motion second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, we are adjourned.